Hello, everybody. My name is Autumn Molay. I'm the head of product and insights marketing at Comscore, and today I'm going to be sharing how to leverage content to drive B2B product success. Before I get started, though, I want to share a little bit about myself. I'm located in the Portland metro area, and I got my start in broadcast journalism, which explains my interest in storytelling and content generation to drive product marketing. Since then, I've spent nearly 10 years in the B2B software as a service, data as a service space. And I currently lead the product and insights marketing team at Comscore, which is an audience measurement company. To dive a little bit deeper into my head, if I had to give any advice to product marketers today, it would be that the most important thing you can do as a product marketer is to ask questions. I tell my team all the time to enter every single meeting, campaign, project situation with questions. Ask questions, and if you don't know the answer, keep asking questions. Second, before you do anything, know who you are talking to and the actions you want them to take as a result of your efforts. You wouldn't get on a plane not knowing where you're going, so you shouldn't start a campaign not knowing what your goal is or who you're talking to. I fundamentally believe this is a critical part of planning any kind of content or product marketing campaign. And finally, make a conscious effort to be creative. I think as product marketers, sometimes we tend to get into the routine of things where we use the same things that work over and over and over again, and we forget to be creative. So sometimes taking a step back, thinking outside the box can not be really fun, but also very effective. So what's the deal with the title of this presentation? If you're a 90s kid, you'll probably recognize the Our Powers Combined. It's from Captain Planet. Essentially what it means is all of the Planeteers' powers combined create Captain Planet who can save the world. I feel like the same goes for marketing. We can no longer afford to operate in silos. So when we combine our powers across marketing verticals, including content and product marketing, we can succeed in this new age of marketing. You all have probably seen this quote before. It's all over the place. It's almost 6 years old now. Marketing is no longer about the stuff that you make, but about the stories you tell. I fundamentally believe this is true. I think you're going to have more success telling stories and showing what your product can do than you are putting out a list of features about the things you sell into the world. So for those of you that are newer to content marketing, you may be wondering, all right, how do I even get started? How do I use content marketing as a part of my product marketing strategy? I'm going to spend the next few slides going into more depth about how to do so and how you can leverage this content that you create to drive B2B product success. So first, know where you're going. Like I said earlier, you need to know your objectives and who you're talking to. What is your company trying to achieve? These are a few things that are pretty common in terms of objectives and goals for marketing and communications. Brand awareness, lead generation, revenue generation, and market perception. You may determine these things by talking to leadership, sales, product management, just to name a few, or you may already know them because they might be widely communicated within your company. But you need to know what you're trying to do and trying to achieve before you kick off your content production and your campaign. You also want to define your target audience and your ideal results. Who is your target persona? Think about what industry they're in, what company they're in. It may be a specific company. What's their job function or their title level? Are they lower down the chain and maybe doing some exploration, or are they a decision maker? What do they care about and what are they trying to do? Is there a pain point or a challenge that they're trying to solve for? If you know all of these things, you can refine your persona, refine your audience, and be really effective at targeting your communication. Also, you want to be able to know the actions that you want them to take as a result of your efforts. Do you want them to reach out to learn more, ask for a demo, visit your website, talk about you on social? Ultimately, we all want our clients and prospects to buy our products. That is the end goal. But sometimes there's a few steps along the funnel to get there. Content marketing can be a critical tool in pushing people through that funnel. All right, so read the room. Know what's buzzing in the industry. There's a few ways you can do this. First, track topics that are getting a lot of press. Most of you should already be subscribed to your industry newsletters, or keep tab of the headlines of the day on your industry publications. If you haven't subscribed to newsletters, I would suggest you do so. Maybe queue up a few bookmarks of things to check every day. Keep an eye on event agendas. What are people talking about? What are they doing panels on or having discussions on? And then keep up with your partners and competitors on social media. Is there anything they're focusing on that you're not? Or is there anything that you can focus on that they're not? Identify the gaps that you can fill, and then know how you can take advantage of your data, insights, or thought leadership strengths. But how do you do that? You pick messages that will resonate with your target audience while promoting your key offerings. You already know what your objectives are. You know what the industry hot topics are, and now you can kind of start to merge those two things in the form of content. This process frequently involves that you work with sales, product management, analytics, leadership, just to name a few. It frequently involves cross-functional conversations. What I typically like to do is start with a SWOT analysis. So you know your strengths and you know your weaknesses, or those of the product or solution you're trying to put out. And then you can discover what the opportunities are that you can take advantage of in the industry. And that's where that industry research comes into play. Who are you? What do you do? What are your unique selling propositions? And how can you maximize them in the industry using content? Next step would be to designate internal experts and develop a roster of writers and speakers. So there's 3 key roles here that I have listed on the right-hand side with the check marks that I think are critical to content production. The first is subject matter experts. You likely probably already know who these people are from your product marketing efforts, but if you don't, it's time to ask around. If you have specific verticals or products or topic areas that are important to your company, designate a subject matter expert who knows a lot about that area and who can help educate you on how to best speak to it. Often these people know what the benefits are in a way that they can clarify for you or help you in crafting the message. Next, identify external speakers. And these first 2 might be the same person. External speakers should have a very deep product knowledge, but also be able to speak to it publicly. This is a rare skill set, but once you find these people, don't let them go, because you will use them in all kinds of campaigns. You will use them in webinars, events, videos, etc. And finally, the last, but I feel like most important piece to all of this is finding out who the content creators are or could be in your company. In marketing, sometimes we assume we're the only ones that can write or that can produce content, and that's not true. There are plenty of people, I would bet, in your companies that can write really well and who are capable of helping you produce this content. That way, if you have limited bandwidth, if you have a smaller team, or maybe not as much of a budget, you can lean on these people to help you create more of a cadence, more of a quantity of content that you can put out into the world. So once you know who's going to help you out with your content, then it's time to pick the content to match your goals. Different content are going to be more effective with different goals. So for instance, if your goal is brand awareness and market perception, you're trying to catch the attention of an audience, you might do something more high level or more flashy, something that doesn't really involve a great deal of knowledge about your product or your company. These could be things like blog posts, industry reports, infographics, videos, etc., just to name a few. Then when you move on to the lead generation stage, where they might know who your company or your product is and want to learn more, then it's time to move on to deeper dive content pieces like interviews, Q&As, white papers, newsletters, etc. And finally, at the last stage, when they're getting ready to buy, they might want to see your product in action. This is a good time to pull out case studies, client testimonials, or maybe create a mini sellable report that is a version of whatever product or data you produce to help convince them to make that final step. Then you're going to want to set a strategic timeline and align on responsibilities. Take note of important dates. These could be industry events, product launches, announcements, etc. You may want to align your content production and distribution with these dates for maximum of effect. Make sure your timeline is realistic and builds in extra time for unforeseen roadblocks. It's better to pleasantly surprise than to disappoint. Create a RACI style matrix. If you don't know what a RACI is, it's worth a Google, but essentially it helps designate responsibilities for the various pieces of your campaign. So who's going to create the content, who's going to review it, approve it, and who do you need to keep informed? Create a project checklist with deadlines and the person responsible for completing each step. This should include both the content production and the promotion so that you can make sure you're building an adequate time for all of these pieces, depending on how many people are involved. And finally, host a kickoff call to ensure alignment on this plan by everyone involved, including the approvers. This is a critical piece because you can make sure people know what they're responsible for and by when to keep the train on the track. When you've produced your content, that's when you need to start thinking about how to promote it. There are myriad ways to promote your content. However, similarly to how you designed your content to speak to specific personas originally, you should also promote your content to those same personas in an effective means. So a few examples of how to do so are on this slide right here. I want to highlight a couple of them that we've had some success with this year at ComScore. The first would be targeted emails. This can be anything from like the account level all the way down to one-to-one. This is a really excellent opportunity to personalize and catch the attention of specific accounts or specific leads that you have in mind to help nurture them and create a relationship. Also, employee amplification, I feel like is one that's not really taken advantage of all that often. Your employees can be your brand influencers. Encourage them to share your content, and they will do so, and the net that you're amplifying your content will widen. Then, once you've promoted your content, you're going to want to keep up the momentum and amplify your success. First, look at all your available KPIs to see what worked and what didn't. If something worked really well, do it again, or keep it in mind for your next campaign. This next part is really, really important. Let your audience guide you. So for instance, if you're hosting a webinar and you get a whole bunch of questions in during the webinar on a particular topic, maybe use that as an opportunity to do a follow-up blog series on that topic that dives in a little more deep than your webinar did. This can be a great way to continue to nurture your leads and create a cadence and a momentum that keeps them interested and helps guide them toward conversion. Finally, keep evaluating. Don't just put content out in the world and consider it done. Check in on your stats and you can adjust and optimize your success. So it's all well and good to outline all these steps, but what does it look like in the real life? I have an example here from a campaign that we did earlier this year that I would like to share with you. So to set the stage, about 5 years ago, over the top or OTT began to grow in popularity. So that's what you may know as like the Netflix and Hulu that are shown on your Roku or your Apple TV. And at this time, media buyers and sellers wanted to be able to understand how to take advantage of the space that was growing pretty rapidly. So in 2017, we debuted our first State of OTT webinar, which was a really high-level report on audience consumption and how audiences were interacting with OTT. We were immediately surprised by the success of this report, and we've been doing it every year since. The challenge being that we've had to beat our own success every year, which I'll get to in a minute. 2020 posed a really interesting challenge for us in that COVID hit and it changed our industry pretty dramatically, really fast. Brands were, really struggling to find the audiences that they were trying to reach in this new normal, and we wanted to help them with that. So our goal was continued lead and revenue generation for our OTT and connected TV measurement solutions, but also generally just helping the industry understand what was happening during this really unprecedented time. And our MarCom goal, a little more selfishly, was to beat our last year's record-setting webinar attendance. Our target audience were streaming services. So again, Netflix, Hulu, etc., device brands, that would be the Roku and the Apple TV. Also advertisers, media agencies, and TV networks. We started by evaluating the hot topics in 2020. We found that 3 were really, really key. As I mentioned, COVID-19. How did it affect consumption? With everybody staying home, did everyone move to OTT? Were they watching more streaming? I think intuitively we knew the answer to that was yes, but we didn't know how much, and we wanted to look at that and share that with the industry. Growth of ad-supported services. So as more people move to this new platform, obviously advertisers want to reach them, and they wanted to know how to do so. And also connected TV viewing trends. So that'd be things like smart TV or videos that are viewed over your TV. How are they doing, and how are they doing in comparison to other platforms? So we leveraged our internal resources to make this happen. We looked at our roster and we selected a presenter who knew the product inside and out, but who could also speak publicly with a lot of confidence. And he did a very excellent job. Then we picked a date for our webinar and backed out the project plan to create time for us to do a lot of promotion, to create time for content production and for reviews, etc. This was really important because there was a lot of people involved in this project who were doing other things outside of this. So we needed to be sure that we were cognizant of their schedules, but also effective with the content and the promotion. And then we thought creatively. Like I said at the beginning of this presentation, we stepped outside of the box and thought about new ways that we could promote this piece of content that maybe we hadn't thought of before. In the previous year, our creative thought was to create a test your knowledge quiz to drive webinar registrations, and this was a hit. People love taking quizzes, and they really loved taking our OTT quiz, and it actually helped send more people to our registration page to register for a webinar. And we also turned it into an internal employee competition. So similar to what I said earlier about employee amplification, we allow our employees to take the quiz and encourage them to share their results and to share it on LinkedIn, et cetera, to amplify with their social networks, which drove even more registrations. This year, we created a too long didn't read version of our email with the top 5 webinar insights in infographic form. So those people who maybe didn't have time to view a webinar or had Zoom fatigue could just take a high-level glance at the top insights that were in the webinar, and that might lead them to download the presentation. So, what was the success? I am super proud that our 2020 State of OTT webinar broke our worldwide webinar registration and attendance record. This was really thrilling for our team. We also, on top of that, had record-setting webinar attendee engagement, a ton of questions asked during the presentation, and a ton of interest from our clients and prospects. This led to increased marketing influence and marketing source leads compared with the previous year. It also gave our sales team an effective tool to use in reaching out and initiating conversations and spurring interest with their prospects. And finally, it led to invitations to participate in other major industry events, which was really great, and we're going to continue to do so through the end of the year. What did we do to keep up the momentum? We didn't stop there. We used the State of OTT as a springboard for other efforts in promoting our OTT and CTV measurement, including we sent follow-up emails to promote the presentation download. We created deep dive blog posts, like I mentioned earlier, leveraging the questions that were asked during the webinar to really get into the topics that our attendees were the most interested in. We hosted several partner webinars, taking a look with our partners at specific areas of the platform. And then, like I said before, industry event speaking engagements. We have had a lot of interest since our State of OTT webinar this year in being invited to speak about the topic at other industry events. So, to summarize everything that I just said, in case you need a recap, in order to leverage content to really help bring in those leads and that revenue and spread your brand awareness or your product awareness or whatever the goal is you're hoping to achieve, first of all, you need to know what your goal is. And you also need to know who your target audience is. And defining those things may be more complicated than you think, but it can really help in informing your efforts moving forward. Finally, read the room. Know what the industry is saying, what the buzz is out there from your competitors and from your partners and from the press. And this could help you select a topic that is really hot in the moment and will get you a lot more attention. Use what you've got. Mine your own data for stories. Look for your internal resources to create content. Find out who your subject matter experts are and lean on them to get these ideas. Really source whatever you can internally, because this is free. You don't have to pay anybody to do it. And it's something that you can use and leverage to create a ton of content on a really good cadence. Show, don't tell. Make sure that you're not just providing a list of features, you're using content to tell a story, to really dive in to the topics that matter to your audience. And this in turn will drive them towards your products and your solutions. And finally, told you how to put your plan in motion, how to pick tactics that match your goals, and also how to pick the promotional tactics that are best suited to distribute your content. Finally, at the end of all of this, just remember to keep up the momentum and think creatively about how you can promote and put your content out into the world. Content marketing can be a really effective tool when done correctly and can help to generate a ton of interest in the products that you are supporting every day as product marketers. And with that, I'll open up the floor to questions. Thank you very much. Tuning into my presentation. At this time, I'm going to go through some of the questions that you guys have submitted via the chat and the Q&A. Please continue to do so if you have any others. Starting at the top, Sandra asked, what's your experience with external copywriters for deeply technical content? This can be a challenge, as you've probably discovered. The really technical stuff often requires pretty in-depth knowledge that usually comes from being in the middle of your company. So outsourcing this can be a real challenge. A lot of companies choose to hire technical writers for this reason. But if you do have to leverage external copywriters, if that's your only option, I'd say make sure that they're really thoroughly trained on what they're trying to talk about, so that they have that background and that historical context to be able to get it right the first time. That way, you're not going to be left doing rounds and rounds of edits that maybe you don't have time to do. And feel free to let me know if I didn't thoroughly answer that question, Sandra. All right, Andre asked if we could get the slides afterwards. Of course you can. This is going to be a replay on the PMA site, and also you can email me directly. My email is really tiny on the screen there, but it's amole@comscore.com. You can also hit me up on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to give them to you. Could we see the quiz? Yes, you can. Feel free again to reach out to me directly, and I can share that link with you so you can check it out. We've actually done a few of these quizzes now and had really great results. I think we're planning to continue to use them as a part of our content menu, if you will. All right, Lawrence says, I'm trying my best to segment my audiences in accordance with the stage of the funnel they're at. However, I'm struggling to segment my reader personas. Any tips? As you probably saw in my the funnel slide, I typically use content in the most often in the brand awareness and lead generation stage. I feel like it's fairly effective, at least for the B2B software as a service space, to initially bring those leads in. And then you can nurture them from there. However, if you do, this is an area where I would definitely lean on your sales team for information. If you have a CRM system like Salesforce, that could be something that you leverage to see kind of what part of the funnel, the sales funnel, these different readers are at, and be able to kind of tailor the content to reach them based on that stage. What steps do you put in place to understand your customers and prospects, the challenges they face personally and professionally, to write content that's pertinent and resonates amongst your target audience? Excellent question, Bella. I think this goes back to the very top of the presentation where I said to ask questions. This is what you should do when you're talking to anybody internally in your company. Product management, sales, leadership, all of these people know your clients and prospects inside and out, and they're going to be basically your internal subject matter experts on your clients and prospects and what they need, what they face, etc. These people should be able to be a wealth of knowledge for you in helping to fine-tune that content. This is what I was speaking to when I said use what you've got. Make sure you're leaning on your internal experts and developing those relationships internally so that you can get that information when you need it. Also, I would say a lot of companies choose to go to the client advisory board route. Many of you have probably already done that, where in addition to getting feedback on what your clients think about products that you're developing, you're also getting a really good read on how they feel about the various topics in the industry today. And their pain points and challenges. And this could be a really great guide to you to help you take advantage of promoting your strengths and maximizing those opportunities. Herbie says, how can I devise a thorough content strategy that'll help me identify, educate, and convert prospects? I would say, start at the top. You have to understand, again, who you're talking to. Talk to your sales teams, talk to your leadership, talk to product management, figure out what the goal is. I feel like a lot of us start off with these really broad goals, and that's not helpful to anybody. If you're trying to reach everybody, you're not going to reach anybody because it's not going to be personalized enough for the message to really resonate. I'd start again with figuring out who it is that you want to talk to. And then figuring out your key messages, like your unique selling propositions for your company and what the best pieces of content are to get those across. So maybe it's like a quick blog series of for instance, we've done a blog series in the past of the top 10 burning issues for a particular persona, where we kept up a cadence over time that we promote to a particular group over email and get them to really start engaging with our products and services. Something like that I found can be pretty effective, and it ends up being fairly personalized and targeted in the long run. Ann Hunter, how do you measure the brand impacts of the program and marketing influence leads? Not quite sure if I'm understanding what that question is, so feel free to clarify. But I think if you're talking about a brand KPIs, which we all know are difficult to measure, brand impact KPIs, in terms of marketing influence leads, for our purposes, we count anything that we put out into the world that touches a prospect that eventually converts as a marketing influence lead. Marketing source leads obviously are the ones that we bring in initially, and those are the best kind of leads in my opinion. The rest of it though, I think you can get a really good feel. It's less of a measure, but you can get a good feel for your brand impact by speaking to the people that are interfacing with the clients regularly and the prospects regularly to get that feedback on what you've done. You'll know pretty much right away if it's effective and if it's a hit with your group based on feedback that you've gotten internally. Okay, IPIC, and sorry if I'm messing up your name there. Creating content for promoting the product features and a new launch can be quite different. When launching a new feature or an update, what channels do you think would be the most important to promote? For this, I tend to lean on email marketing and nurturing. Also, I think blog posts are a really great tool for doing this, in that you can take the feature that you're trying to promote and do that show don't tell element that I was talking about before. So like, if you know the feature, what is the end benefit of that feature, and blowing that out into a full-fledged story of some kind that really speaks to your audience would be the most effective means of going about that. And it doesn't have to be a super huge haul, resource or bandwidth wise either. Gemma says, do you have any tips for encouraging colleagues outside of marketing to help with content creation if they're not forthcoming in doing so? Yeah, like I've somewhat stumbled upon these people. I've in conversations where I've been asking for data or insights. I've been asking more questions about the product, or asking, about the client or prospect needs. Sometimes I've run into people who will just raise their hand to do these things, or I'll just flat out ask, are you comfortable writing a blog post? And I feel like a blog post is the most safe way to test these waters a little bit, and you're going to find out really quickly who's really, really good at telling the narrative and who's a great writer. And if you do find that person, you can continue to leverage them, and you'll get a good sense of their bandwidth, what they're capable of doing, what they're willing to do over time. And hopefully you'll start to build that relationship internally too, where these people are more and more willing to help you out because they're getting something from it too. That might be they're showing up as the author of the blog post. And that's great for them personally and for their career. So, I'd pitch it in that way, recruiting presenters for a webinar. Also, everybody wants to have speaking under their belt. And, a lot of people will jump at that opportunity if it's posed to them. Craig says, do you have any tips on auditioning your content using social validation? Feel free to clarify this question if I'm missing the answer here. I think that maybe you're talking about what the last piece where we were using employees to put it out in the world. If not, Craig, feel free to clarify. I think what we typically do is, for every major piece of content, obviously social is a piece of that promotion. It's an easy way to get it out in the world. And there's also there could be a whole other presentation about how to promote content on social. If you're interested in learning more about that, I'm happy to talk with you about that as well. But in terms of putting it out in the world with your employees, we've had some success with, like I mentioned before, turning it into kind of an internal competition where we offer our employees the ability to engage with whatever it is we're doing. And for instance, the quiz, and maybe we give them an extra point on the quiz for sharing on social. So that's a way that you can really get it out in the world, because obviously each one of these employees has their own networks. Okay, Vignesh says, could you enlighten us with a few in-product content marketing strategies and the frameworks to work with to see success in B2B products using content strategy? I think that what I typically do for any kind of product marketing strategy is I just naturally build in the content as a part of the plan. I feel like content can be such an effective piece in lead and demand gen that it's just a thing that needs to be a part of a plan. I think it depends obviously on what you're trying to do with your product. If you're doing go-to-market, that's going to be a very different approach than if you're just trying to promote a new feature, an upgrade, enhancement. I'd say, this presentation provides a pretty good guide on how to get started with that, but I'm definitely willing to discuss that in more depth offline if I didn't answer that question. Sharon says, when starting as a product marketer with a new company, would in broad strokes steps be 1, do a content audit, 2, understand goals for content, and 3, understand the customer needs, etc.? Can you speak to this? Yeah, so I think when you're starting with a new company, obviously, all of us would want to learn all there is to know about the company, and one of the easiest ways to do that is to review the web content or the insights that they have out in the world. Taking an audit of what they've put out previously is always a really good way of getting up to speed with what they've done and haven't done. From there, I think that I would definitely understand the objectives of your company in general, what the priorities are for the year. Personally, as a product marketer, I create, quarterly or half yearly areas of focus that ladder up to the company goals so that I can make sure that we're supporting those goals. And I feel like content should do the same. So content should ladder up to whatever the goals are for your product marketing team and then for your company to help make sure you're furthering the things that are important to your industry and to your clients and prospects and to your leadership team. Once you know what those goals are, you can start to kind of ladder down even more granular objectives for the content specifically and what you want it to achieve. And I'd say in parallel, this is when the target audience needs to happen. You should be having these discussions. Both of these things should be discussed at the same time, ideally, because they're both going to rely on each other. Your objective, you'll need to know who you're talking to achieve that objective, and vice versa. All right, Sandra says, in your experience, what's worked to align content for various personas to a wider campaign theme? That's a great question. And that's actually a really fun thing to do, I think. So you have your high-level theme, you know what you're trying to put out in the world. And I think all of us as product marketers, one of our challenges is differentiating for the various personas. Content can be the same thing. So you have this theme, distill it down into your personas. You should already know who it is you're targeting. And once you know what's important to each of those personas, you should be able to speak to your greater content theme in a way that resonates specifically to each persona. So again, like maybe you have this broad theme, and underneath that, you're writing a blog post for one persona, you're doing a video for another, or you're doing, blog posts for both. It depends on the situation, but it's fine and encouraged to personalize as much as possible and as much as you're able to with the resources that are available to you within your team. Sandra, again, you mentioned earlier that conferences and competition can be a good source of inspiration. What's your recommendation to avoid regurgitating the same stuff and make it your own? That's also a great question. And that's a big reason why I think paying attention to those agendas, because you're going to start to see themes that get really overdone. And you'll know, like, when you're entering into the content planning process, you'll know, like, hey, maybe we don't want to put out a webinar on this or a white paper on this because, like, it's been talked about to death. Like, let's think about a new angle, come into this a little bit differently than everybody else is doing. What's a way to think about that maybe would be like, what is really specific and personalized to your offering that sets you apart? What is something that, like, only your company can speak to with confidence and go in that direction? And it can be related to whatever the topic is that has been talked about in depth, but maybe it's a different take on it. And that getting into that kind of creative mind space is really important there, but it can be very much a challenge. All right. Marie Claire says, how do you prioritize the time to develop new content ideas consistently? This is a good thought, because a lot of us don't have a lot of time on our hands. So making a conscious effort to brainstorm content, and again, having to get into that creative mind space can be a challenge. I'd say, my best advice would be don't treat it like a separate process. Make it a part of your process. Think of it as another tool in your toolkit to help promote your product and to help increase demand gen for your product. If you treat it as a critical means to achieve what you're doing already in your product marketing goals, then it'll just weave in a really seamless way. And moving forward, that'll become the expectation that content is a part of your plan for product marketing purposes. Okay, I think that we've reached the end of our questions, so I'll probably toss it back over to the Product Marketing Alliance folks. But thank you everyone for attending today. Again, feel free to follow up with me via my email, amolay@comscore.com, or on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to talk more. Thank you all.